to another video. Today I'm going to be making a little blouse. I want something that is layerable for winter, but also that I can wear in spring and autumn. I already have a game plan. I have a whole idea in mind. This is my design idea. It's going to be really cute. It's going to have some lovely puffy sleeves and a big collar. And in the back, we're gonna do some buttons. I'm a big fan of buttons down the back of a blouse. It's very vintage. I do have a bit of a backstory for this fabric, so let's get into another long intro. This is the fabric we're gonna be working with today. It is a cotton sateen from Minerva.com. It's a really beautiful print. This one's called Petal Spray. I really like it. It's really beautiful, and I'm really excited to work with the cotton sateen because I have not tried their cotton sateen yet, so I'm really excited about that. Backstory to this is, in case you don't know, I am a Minerva Brand Ambassador, and that means basically that I get sent fabric by them for free. In exchange, I make whatever I want with it, but I have to post it on their website within a certain time frame. Every month I get an email from them saying, hey, here are some fabrics that you can pick from to work with, and I'll pick what I want and they'll send it to me, right? So in September, I picked this fabric, and my idea was that it was early September. I probably wanted to wear it on holiday. Even if I didn't have time to make something before my holiday, it was still gonna be hot like all through September and all through October. So I still had like 2 months of wear out of something. However, this got lost in the mail. I'm pretty sure Royal Mail lost my package. I don't know what happened. So the package got lost. I reached out. They were like, yeah, don't worry about it. We'll send it again. I received it in November. I live in Portugal. Everything has to be stocked at customs. You have to like fill a form online. Every time I get fabric, I have to go on the customs website and be like, yeah, this is fabric. And they're like, oh, okay. And then they send it to me. Usually like from the moment that the fabric gets to the customs to the moment that I get it, it can be anywhere from like 1 week to 3 weeks. I posted on my social media and I asked what they thought I should make with it, because obviously I'm not making a summer dress now because I want to wear it. Most people said to make a blouse. For notions and stuff, I've got some rickrack here. This is like a toasty, like almost mustard yellow, but it actually matches perfectly to the yellow in the fabric. And then I also have my buttons picked out already. I'm gonna go yellow. These are a bit more of like a true yellow. My partner picked my buttons. He most of the time picks the buttons that I'm using for a project, which is just a fun little thing that we do. They're vintage. I got them at a flea market, so I'm excited to use these actually. Let's do it. Let's go get started. For the pattern for this, I am using a real Frankenstein situation. The bodice is a Burda vintage pattern reproduction that was originally in their September 1959 issue. I have made this before for my Barbie outfit, and today I will be doing similar alterations to that one. I drafted some facings because I don't like the way they finish the neckline in the magazine. For the sleeves, I'm using the basic long sleeve from Gertie's Ultimate Dress Book, but I am adding 5 centimeters on each side of the side seams to make them poofier. By the way, 5 centimeters is about 2 inches. I'm also using a self-drafted cuff that is actually too small, so I just add some extra width to it, and I should really just make a new pattern piece for. For the collar, I'm using the same collar that I used in my flannel dress, but I drafted that from a Peter Pan collar in Gertie's Ultimate Dress Book. Now it's time to transfer my markings onto the fabric. I am just using Taylor's chalk here. I need to mark out the darts mostly. As you can see, I did add 5 centimeters to the center back seam to make my button placket. I'm also going to cut out some interfacing for the collar, cuffs, and facings. I'm using the Violin of Lieseline H310. As I was cutting out the bodice and the facings, it was bringing back a lot of memories of when I had made this top before, and I couldn't remember if I had transferred the neckline alterations I'd made to my pattern. So I checked my sewing journal, and yes, I had not done that, so I went ahead and did it now. Then I started batch pinning my pieces together, including my cuffs, the darts, and the facings. Next, I stitched the things I'd pinned using some black thread, and I also added the gathering stitches on the sleeves, both at the shoulder and at the cuffs. And while I'm here, I also went ahead and stitched the sleeve closed. I'm going to finish my seams on the sergers, so I'll quickly run those seams through. After I pressed all those things in place, I started my next batch of pinning. This time I'm doing the shoulder and side seams of the bodice with right sides together, and also pinning the cuffs to the sleeves. For this, I am going to match the seams, and then I pull all the gathers to the middle of the cuff. The next day, I stitched those seams and also added my tag to the facings, and then I started working on adding the rickrack to the collar. I wanted to sandwich the rickrack so that it would look like a scalloped edge when I flipped the collar right side out, but I didn't trust that I could get the placement right if I stitched all the layers in one go. So I first stitched the rickrack to one of the collar pieces along the seam allowance, and then I stitched the two collar pieces together like I would any other collar. Once I'd done that for both of the collar pieces, I could trim it down, clip the corners, flip it right side out, and give it a really good press. Oh, and I also trimmed the seam allowances on the cuffs and serged the seams of the bodice before I pressed all of that. So after that, I started pinning the collar through the neckline of the bodice. But it was looking kind of weird, so I decided to put the bodice on my dress form to try and see it in a more 3D way, because sometimes that helps me figure out what the hell is going on. And I did figure out what was going on, and you can tell that it's not good news by the look on my face here. I tried it on, and there's a couple of issues going on here. It's hard to tell because this fabric is so busy, which I think is going to play in my favor. First things first, I have about this much of extra fabric here. It was like gaping. Obviously, putting a dart right here in the middle of the chest is very unorthodox. Judging by how much you can't see the other darts, I think it would be fine, and I think it is what I'm gonna end up doing just for like making it my life easier, and then in the future mock this up properly to move this dart fullness into the shoulder as it should be. The other issue that I have is that the collar is turning out weird. But in order for my collar to kind of sit nicely and sort of like not touching but like almost touching at the front, at the back it ends like right here. And this is like my button placket. So I did want the collar to kind of extend. So my idea is to just like scrap this one but use the pattern that I used for this just to make it like longer at the back using the pattern for this blouse. So first things first, I put that weird chest dart in there and totally improved the fit. It's not noticeable at all unless you're really, really looking for it, so I'm okay with it. And then I got my tissue paper out and I started working on that new collar pattern. First, I traced the neckline of the blouse, and then I used my first version of the collar to kind of help me get the shape I wanted for the new collar. And then I repeated the whole process again for the new collar, and you can see here that the new one has a really different shape around the neckline. So now I can pin the collar pieces to the bodice, carefully aligning the fronts, and I'm doing this with the wrong sides of the collar facing the right side of the bodice. The wrong sides of the collar for me are the uninterfaced pieces, by the way. Then I pin the facings on top with right sides together to the collar, and this is going to sandwich the collar in between the facings and the bodice. Then at the back opening edges, I've already pressed the button placket in place, so I'm unfolding it once so that I can stitch the facings all the way to the edge. That way, when it's turned over into place, the facings will be tucked up under and it will give a really clean edge. Then I stitch that in place, run the seam through my serger, and give it a really good press before bringing it back to the sewing machine to add some understitching to the facing. Now, before I can add the sleeves to the bodice, I have to press the seam allowance in on the cuffs and stitch that down by hand. You could probably do this on the machine, but it takes me around maybe no longer than 10 minutes to do this by hand, and I get an invisible finish that I have way more control over. And finally, I can add my adorable sleeves to my adorable top. I'm just going to pin these with right sides together and bring all the gathering up into the shoulder seam. I'm really curious to know what you guys think about setting in sleeves, so please do let me know in the comments. I know a lot of people seem to hate doing this, and I mean, it's a fiddly seam to do for sure, but it also usually means that we're almost finished with a garment. So this is when I start to get really excited about it. So I tend to associate the setting in of the sleeves with the finish line more than I do with the fiddly seam. But please do let me know where you stand. I'm really curious. Now for the hem, I ended up removing the 5 centimeters that I added of extra hem allowance, and I tried it on to see how long I wanted it to be, and then marked that and stitched it down on the machine. But the way I did it is a bit more interesting. So to get a really lovely finish on the opening edges again, I turned the folded edge of the button placket over to the outside once and stitched that down where I wanted my seam to hit, and then I trimmed down just that bit. Then I flipped it to the inside again, which creates a really nice corner, and I turned the rest of the hem up twice and stitched it down on the machine. Last but certainly not least, it's time for buttons. I marked where I wanted them to go, and then I made the buttonholes. Once I've got all my buttonholes done, I line up the button placket of the blouse and I use the buttonholes to mark where I want the buttons to go. And I'm actually going to be sewing them on by machine today, so let me show you how I do that. I take off any presser foot from the machine. I believe that there is a button presser foot attachment, but I've not tried it, and this method has always worked for me. I actually learned it from the manual of my sewing machine. Then I do a zigzag stitch, and I set the width of my stitches to the space between the holes of the buttons I'm using, which is usually 4 millimeters, and then the stitch length has to be 0. I bring my fabric over to the machine and place the button on the marking and lower the presser foot thingy to hold my button in place. And then using the hand crank, I carefully lower my needle to make sure it's going to go through the holes of the button. This bit is super important because if you sew straight away, you could break a button or a needle. Once you've got the placement right, I like to do a good few zigzag stitches in there, and then I finish it off by doing a couple of straight stitches in one of the holes to tie off the threads. It's really easy when you do get used to it, and it makes the button sewing process so much easier, faster, and sturdier too. Then all there's left to do is cut off those threads and we're ready for the reveal. That's the blouse. I'm really excited about it. It's super cute. I have a little long sleeve shirt under it. I feel like it's going to be the perfect layerable piece. I love the collar. It's so cute, and I'm really happy that I went back and redid it. I don't really have that much to say other than I'm really happy with it. The fabric was really lovely to work with. Long sleeves in the summer here is not going to work for me, so I do think I'll make like a cute summer version with the rest that I have, if I have enough. We'll see. So all I have left to say is to remind you to subscribe, to follow me on Instagram or TikTok or on minerva.com, or maybe all three. All of those are linked below so you can find them really easily. I have also gone ahead and linked all of the products that I used. That is everything for me for today. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video, and I will see you in the next one.